Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings. Today we will be talking about the fixed ops profit leak no one is measuring. And Ted, we've got quite the panel assembled with us this day.
We have two experts in the field, Sarah, great colleagues and friends of ours at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Steve Thompson is the president of Integrity Cost Consulting, helping dealers navigate these interesting waters that we're in here in the middle of 2026. Also coming to us from Florida, Marco Zwanenburg, one of the founding fathers of the Fixed Ops Roundtable, great colleague. Steve and Marco, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
Ted.
Ted.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, Ted, this is so exciting. We have some incredible questions to ask of our group today, but want to start the conversation with you, Steve, and just kind of set the stage for our audience. You know, most fixed ops leaders track labor and parts performance very closely, but where do you see the biggest blind spots today, and what areas that impact margin but don't get measured as closely?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sarah. So what we've seen in our work with dealerships is really three expenses that don't really get the attention they deserve, and basically these costs don't really spike, but they drift, and over years they become very expensive and very high. And those are utilities, waste disposal, and commercial laundry. Those are three areas that we're seeing that they're just not big enough. They're not, like you said, they're not the inventory, they're not parts, right? They're not advertising, and they get rolled up into higher numbers, and they just don't receive the visibility. They might be managed, they're just not optimized or validated.
And Marco, you know, as you know, technician and thinking about this, you know, across the shop, what other opportunities do you see as you know, some of those blind spots that you know impact margin but don't get measured that closely?
Well, to Steve's point, I think that a lot of business owners, a lot of dealership owners, just accept like uniforms, utility bills, etc., as just part of the game. They have no idea that it's actually manageable, or that there's different tiers or to it, or different measures. Another thing that you could implement is having a little bit more of employee awareness when it comes down to these expenses. Like, no one cares really about leaving the light on at work, right? Because you're not paying the bill. But at the end of the day, you are paying the bill because you're gobbling up that already really, really tight margin. Same with like leaving the water running where you're not supposed to. And especially like with the higher end dealerships, or the dealerships that offer car washes, make sure the car wash is done right before handover, not after the job is completed, because now you may have to wash the car twice if the car sits there for another week. So it's just awareness, both from the ownership perspective, and you can do something about these costs, and employee engagement into like, hey guys, turn the light off when you're done.
You know, Marco, you've spent years in dealership. Sarah, yourself the same. Marco, I don't ever recall a dealership having a purchasing manager where there was that one person who just focused on this type of thing, Marco. And I think they rely on the managers to be able to navigate this. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's an excellent point, Ted, because that's exactly what it is. So much is getting pushed off on managers. And like Steve and I had a chat recently about this, that managers are just so overrun, and they are just not equipped to navigate these fields of waste disposal, and how many different options there are, what you have to adhere to, and what category, what tier you fall in. So having someone like Steve and his company on hand to help you guide through that and help you save costs, and like I already said, these tight margins that we run on, it could be over a year. You could save your company tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if you talk about multi-roof. It's definitely worth reaching out for. I'm not saying that the managers are bad, absolutely not, but they are just so incredibly busy, so overrun, that this is just something that, and you don't know what you don't know.
And Steve, you started this conversation here on the Fixed Ops Roundtable a while back, and now we're hearing a lot of people talking about, I got to address costs. And like Marco said, the managers are so busy. They don't have that one person who's looking at the contracts, reviewing them, looking at the invoices as they come each month, whatever it is, and cross-referencing them and keeping track if there's been any slippage, okay, if I may, in the pricing. And Steve, with so many competing and priorities, let's say in a dealership, how do you decide which expense areas are worth revisiting? You as that outside purchasing manager, if you will, and which ones are assumed to be good enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I also want to say something. What Marco said is that no one's doing anything wrong, right? It's just that they just don't know what they don't know. They don't know what's possible. And there's all these dealerships have great internal processes where the invoices coming in, they're being approved, they're being paid, but it's really not, they're not really being validated. So I think that's where you start. It's like, what costs, what expenses are we paying now that have never been validated, like truly validated, benchmarked, and those are typically it's the utilities, the waste disposal, the commercial laundry. What we've seen is what people try to, or organizations try to reduce their costs by switching vendors, and it's like you don't really have to, right? We don't even try to switch vendors. You don't have to switch vendors. You just have to know what the cost should be, and that's kind of the expertise we bring without spending a lot of their time. They don't really need a lot of time. And I had a conversation with the owner of a 14 rooftop dealership over the weekend, and he was saying we just don't have the time. I said, I understand that. So here's what we've done. We've changed our approach. Instead of needing a bunch of expensive a bunch of invoices, what we've done is let's just pick one expense, one location, one invoice. Let's just validate that to see if there's anything, if we need to dig deeper. And I mean, that's a very light lift for any team, I would think.
Steve, a follow up on this. I'm thinking about a lot of the multi rooftop groups, and we have a lot of dealer groups that are part of our audience today that have multiple rooftops, and executive leadership at maybe a corporate level that are thinking about all of these expenses maybe from that enterprise type of setup. So they have one process, one expense provider, and they just kind of roll it out across all of these stores. But the thing that really stands out is that there's bound to be really small inefficiencies that may not stand out at one store, but then compound across the portfolio. I'm curious to hear, what you see with that.
Yeah, exactly, Sarah. Yeah, these expenses they tend to be small, relatively small, per rooftop. But you go across multiple rooftops, it becomes very meaningful. Another conversation I had recently with a multi-rooftop operator, he's basically saying he gives every general manager the leisure, to the latitude to control their own expenses. They're not really taking advantage of group savings. It's like, wow, that's significant opportunity there. I'm just thinking, we see this a lot where, let's pick on laundry again, where they have a master service agreement covering all locations. I mean, it's inevitable that we find that not every location is being charged the same price. It happens all the time, not just in car dealerships, throughout the every industry. So they definitely could benefit from taking a holistic approach, looking at it from the group level.
And Steve, I think the time to do that is now because variable is getting squeezed. There's no question about that. Fixed ops is the one that's, fixed. It's creating the revenue, service and parts. And, a lot of focus now on those expenses that may not have been there even just a few months ago, Steve.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I know, I don't know if we're going to get into this, but I think these costs that we're talking about, utilities, waste disposal, commercial laundry, they're more complicated than they appear or that people believe. There's like, just if we look at just utilities, there are over 1,700 electric utility companies in the United States. So so that means there's multiple electric companies even in every state, and they all bill differently. They all have 200, 400 page tariffs, which describes how they bill their customers. And there's multiple tariffs within each utility. So it's like, how do you know which one is right for you? I mean, and that's what we bring. That's what we bring to the table, is that expertise. We know which one is best for you. And So I mean, I mean, 1,700 utility companies across the country. That's a lot. So there's no way any dealership is going to have that kind of expertise of which one, what rate structure should we be on, like Marco said earlier. Um, so I think that's the problem that we're having, is that a lot of people think that these are just, yeah, it is what it is, right? We'll get another vendor, we'll send out RFPs, whatever the case may be, but they're being managed, like I said earlier. They're not being optimized, they're not being validated.
And like Marco said, Steve, everyone's pressed for time. The managers have a lot of things, a lot of pieces, a lot of moving parts they're keeping track of, and a lot of this now just flies under the radar and it goes through. And there's that time constraint, as I mentioned, and this really is an opportunity for dealerships to save some money and to do it now.
Yeah, I agree. I think the time is always one of whether it's even expressed or it's a silent objection. They just don't have priority, right? They're working on the culture. Like Mark and I spoke last week about leadership and just the culture of the organization and inventory. There's a lot of pressure, so, and there's just so much time in a day, right? 24 hours, we all have the same amount of time in a day, and they just don't have the time, or they don't think they do. So, going back to what I said before, I think we've changed our approach because we've listened to it, we've heard it, we understand. Because a lot of times people could say, oh, this doesn't cost any money because we're working on a performance basis. It doesn't cost very little time. It's like, well, how much is little, right? Is it 4 hours? It's like, no, we just give us. Let's just focus on one expense area, maybe one location, one contract, one invoice, and we can tell within 5 minutes if there's opportunities there.
Very well said, Steve. Marco, just coming back to you for a quick second with some of these expenses that Steve is describing. Where do you see opportunities to educate your team, educate dealership employees about some of the opportunities that they can be keeping an eye out for, as they're thinking about all of these different expenses that may be flying under the radar?
Well, let's start with something very simple. How many uniforms are being serviced of employees that are no longer there? That happens so many times. So when they, in Steve's point, when they switch vendors because the costs are out of control, the costs go down. Why? Because every employee that is there gets matches for uniforms. So obviously there's less uniforms to be out to be serviced and be provided. So something as simple as just keep a head count. If someone either leaves or gets fired, make sure that they get taken off the roster. Another thing is that, like I mentioned earlier, get your employees aware of that. Yeah, you may not pay the bill directly, but you are paying the bill. So if you don't have to use electricity or water, then don't, because at the end of the week, the day, the month, it does impact you. If you want a special tool or some equipment is broken in the shop or you want a raise, that money has to come from somewhere. So if we can save margins, and especially variable ops, they are so incredibly tight. Luckily, on the fixed up side, we do a lot better, but still a penny is a penny. And you got to honor that penny to make the dollar. So let's just be smart about this. I mean, the automotive industry is the only industry that I know that will literally spend a buck to save a penny. Well, why don't we save a penny to make a buck? Let's start doing it the other way around. So having someone with the information and the knowledge like Steve around to navigate these complex problems. It's like the manager doesn't do the taxes either from the dealership, right? They get sent off to a CPA, to a professional. So you don't bring a car to a bakery to get fixed, and you don't come to see me to do a root canal. You go to the appropriate people. So take advantage of what you have in front of you.
Okay, that would be Steve Thompson, everybody, from Integrity Cost Consulting. Very well said, Marco. Hey, Marco, about 2 weeks ago, you and Sarah and I were in a dealership together, and I was in the back bringing in some boxes in for that big event, and they were delivering the uniforms, okay, for the technicians. And Industrial Laundry was bringing them in and dropping them off, and they were all in the same place. And we actually had to move those uniforms, okay? And I couldn't believe how many uniforms. I mean, and that was a big shop, okay?
Right.
Marco, but not the biggest shop, right? And I mean, there's a lot there, and how do you keep track of all that and the expenses? And I imagine that goes on, many, many times, that delivery and the pickup and back and forth. And Marco, I think, as an example, Steve has talked about industrial laundry for a long time, but that really, as an example, impacts the dealership in a big, big way.
Oh yeah, think about it. Like every technician on average gets handed 12 sets of uniforms. That is 12 pairs of pants, 12 pairs of shirts, so keep track of that. But let's not just think about the uniforms. How about the fender covers? How about mop hats? How about the rags? How about all those items that we have? So here's another thing, for example, to bring it back to Sarah's point, how can we get a team on board? Well, rags, first of all, it's an OSHA violation. Rags, shop rags, do not belong in the trash. Put them in the correct receptacles to where they can be picked up by the company. So there's another cost-saving thing. But yes, you're right that the amount of industrial laundry that there is, and a lot of companies also utilize industrial laundry for the floor mats, for example, that they roll out in front of the parts counter. There is just so much more to it than just a uniform. So it's a very complex machine that happens every week. So keep an eye out on it.
Dealers
Marco,
watching.
that's great points. As you're talking about uniforms, you mentioned all those items that just people don't realize how many items they're actually using. And talking about the uniforms in the 12 sets of pants and the 12 shirts. So these uniform companies have certain fees. So you're not just paying for the uniform of the shirt and the pants. You're paying for maintenance, inventory, automatic loss rate, right? So they're automatically they're going to build in a rate. Okay, we're going to lose 10%, whatever, 16%. It's like 16%. It's like, why does it have to be 16? Why, okay, there's going to be some loss. What is it? It should be 16, should be 3, 2, right? So we negotiate that. We know what the market, we know what's possible.
All right. Steve Thompson, everybody, he's your person. You don't need to hire anybody else, put additional headcount on. He specializes in this. This is what he does. He does the root canals, okay? And this is his business at Integrity Cost Consulting. He works with dealers. Everybody, if you would, pick up the phone. You see his phone number on the screen there. You can reach out to them on the web as well, Integrity Cost Consulting. And I see his email, steve@integritycostconsulting.com. As you heard, he doesn't need a lot of information to kind of get started. And Sarah, great time to start saving a few dollars in the dealership.
It is, Ted, and margins are more important than ever. Fixed operations continue to be the most important department in the dealership. And Steve, thank you for all your attention to helping dealers really maximize their margins.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Great job, gentlemen. Marco, thank you for providing all the color and, to bring this all together. So as always, what would Marco do? So appreciate you, Marco, so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure, guys. My pleasure.
Everybody, Marco Zwanenburg, Steve Thompson here from Integrity Cost Consulting. Visit them on the web at integritycostconsulting.com here today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.